The graveyard on the edge of Dry Creek was the kind of place folks avoided unless they had no choice, a patch of windblown earth fenced in by splintered cedar, where the prairie grass whispered secrets to the dead. That's where Elias Boone found her that cold October evening, kneeling in the dirt beside a fresh mound, her shoulders shaking, her hands pressed to a wooden cross that had no flowers, no name, just the crude carving of a date. The wind cut sharp, tugging strands of her hair across her tear-streaked face, but she didn't seem to feel it. She was whispering something over and over, so low that Elias had to step closer to catch it. "I'm sorry, Mama, I tried." Her dress was threadbare, her boots too small, and from the way her skin clung to her bones, she hadn't eaten much in days. She didn't look up until his shadow fell over her, and even then, her eyes held more fear than grief, the kind of fear that comes from living in a world where kindness costs too much. Elias wasn't the type to meddle in other folks' affairs. A man learned quick in Dry Creek that helping the wrong person could get you killed, and the wrong person usually meant anyone who couldn't pay you back. But something about the girl stopped him in his tracks. Maybe it was the way her fingers gripped the cross like it was the only thing tethering her to the earth, or maybe it was the fact that her face reminded him of another time, another loss, when he'd stood in the same dirt over his own mother's grave. "Ma'am," he said softly, tipping his hat, "you got a place to go." She didn't answer. Her gaze fell back to the mound, and her shoulders curled inward like she was bracing for a blow. Elias crouched beside her, not close enough to crowd her, just near enough to be heard over the wind. "What happened?" Her voice cracked when she finally spoke. "They said Mama owed money to the mercantile. Said they'd take the farm if she didn't pay. She worked herself near to death trying, but it wasn't enough. Last week, she just stopped breathing." The words dissolved into sobs that shook her small frame. Elias felt something twist in his chest. He'd seen plenty of hard things in his life, gunfights, hangings, good men ruined by bad luck, but there was a special kind of cruelty in watching a child bury her mother with no one to stand beside her. He glanced at the grave, then back at her. "What's your name?" She hesitated, as if the answer might get her hurt. "Lydia," she said finally. "Lydia Harper." The name meant nothing to him, but it would mean something to others, and not in a way that would help her. Elias knew the mercantile owner, a man named Garrison Pike, who had a habit of bleeding folks dry and then buying up their land for pennies. If Pike thought Lydia was still hanging around, he'd claim her as labor to work off her mother's debt, which was just a fancy way of saying he'd own her life. Elias could have walked away right then, told himself it wasn't his fight. But as he stood there, looking at the girl in the cold dirt, he heard his mother's voice in his head. "Don't you ever leave someone in the rain if you've got a dry roof to give 'em." So he did something no one in Dry Creek expected. He reached out a hand. "Come on," he said. "You're coming with me." Lydia stared at it like it was a snake, unsure if it was salvation or another trap. "Why?" she whispered. Elias's answer was simple. Because no one should have to cry alone beside a grave. He took her back to his ranch, a quiet stretch of land nestled against the foothills, where the only sounds were wind through the cottonwoods and the low murmur of cattle in the distance. The first night, she slept curled in the corner of the bunkhouse, still wearing her boots, like she was ready to run at the first sign of danger. By the end of the week, she was helping in the kitchen, feeding the hens, even smiling once or twice when she thought he wasn't looking. Word got around town fast, too fast. Folks whispered in the saloon that Boone had brought a girl to his place, that maybe he had a soft spot, maybe even a secret. Pike didn't like it one bit. He came riding out to the ranch, papers in hand, claiming legal right to Lydia on account of her mother's debt. Elias met him at the gate with a shotgun in one hand and a look that made Pike rethink his options. In the weeks that followed, Lydia started to change. The hollow look in her eyes gave way to something steadier. She learned to ride, to mend tack, to cook bread without burning it. She planted wildflowers on her mother's grave and visited it every Sunday, but now she stood a little taller when she did. And the town, well, they were shocked, not just that Elias Boone had stood up to Garrison Pike, but that he'd taken in a girl who had nothing to offer but a broken heart and a name the world had already written off. In Dry Creek, folks didn't do that. But Elias had. And it changed things. Some say Lydia grew up to run the ranch beside him. Others say she left one spring to see the world her mother never got to, sending letters back every summer. But everyone agrees on this. That cold October evening, when a cowboy found her crying beside her mother's grave, the thing he did next, offering her a hand instead of turning away, was the kind of choice that made legends out of men. And if this story reminded you that in the Old West, real strength wasn't just in the draw of a gun but in the courage to stand beside someone when the world had left them alone, then hit that subscribe button. More tales like this are riding your way, and you won't want to miss a single one.